lot for having us. Thanks a lot to Bhaskar and his team for this wonderful event. And we're just waiting to start this discussion on how India is playing this key role in the analytics industry in India in general, right? So let's start with Anshu. Anshu, how big is the analytics industry in the world, and what role does India play in it? How is it faring?
Sure. So let me just take a, this is an analytics conference, and I'm sure, each one of us in this event today either is a practitioner or is an enthusiast or an aspirational, has aspirations to get into the industry. So, if I can get some numbers from the audience, what do you guys think is the size of the global analytics industry? I mean, is it 10 billion? Is it 50 billion? Is it 100 billion? Can I get some numbers? Anybody wants to take a guess?
How wrong can it get?
All right. Sorry, so did I hear a number? 20 billion. Yeah. So, there are obviously different ways of, how you can size it. But as per Forbes, the 2016 number was 300 billion, the global analytics industry, and that was growing, and it's growing at about 22 to 23% CAGR year on year. So which means to say that, in another, by 2020, the number is somewhere looking like to be, close to, upwards of, 500 billion or close to $500 billion and so on, right? So the thing is, the point we are trying to make is, it's not just the numbers, it's the need of the hour, irrespective of, whichever industry or sector or geography in the world that you are in, there is need for analytics in your businesses. If you're not really harnessing the power of the data, then you're not doing something right. There's another very interesting statistics that says that by 2020, all new investments that happen in businesses, about 40% of those will go into analytics. So that's the new opportunity, or that's the opportunity to to mine.
No, but that's an interesting point, because that gives us a segue into something that we've also want to talk about, saying now that it's so big, which are those industries where it's very prevalent and growing in India? Ashwin, you want to take a stab at that?
In India? Okay. I think the biggest sector in India is BFSI. BFSI accounts to almost 45% of the demand for analytics space. I think you mentioned 300 billion, right?
That's right, yeah.
The market in India is currently estimated at about 2 billion
Sure.
at this point in time.
True.
But growing at a CAGR of 25-26%. So we expect that it should double in the next 3 years. But BFSI is the largest with about 45% share in that. I guess they have the numbers with them to play around with, so they've had a head start. Interestingly, marketing and advertising is number 2, which was something of a surprise.
Right.
One doesn't associate that as an industry vertical, which would be up there, but it's certainly there. And the third largest is in terms of your, what shall I say, telecom is incidentally not there in the number 3. It's number 4, followed by pharma.
Probably.
E-commerce. E-commerce, yeah. Thank you. E-commerce is number 3. So I frankly would have thought that e-commerce would be much higher, but I guess it's still very nascent within that space. So BFSI clearly the largest segment, and I come from the insurance space. He's also from the BFSI space. We've just scratched the surface, if you ask me. So while we are 45%, I think the demand is there to do a lot more with the data that we have. And I guess as data gets a lot more structured in India, right now it's a lot unstructured. But with, I know that there are people who advocate for and not for Aadhaar. But if you ask me, Aadhaar becoming all prevalent, PAN becoming, a mandatory thing for transactions, I think, it's just
But this is a very interesting stat. Anshu told us that it's about 300 billion, and you just said that it's about 2 billion. So India is about 0.66% of the market, though I'm sure we contribute a lot more. Shashi, what's your take? What's causing this? I mean, how is India going to be different? How are we different?
In fact, there are two aspects. when today we see $2 billion as the overall share for India. However, if you look at the work that we have done so far, there has been an element of labor arbitrage. And that's the reason we see the size is small. Going forward, I seriously think, it's a level playing field, and we have a huge scope in going beyond labor arbitrage. Now, no more, we should not be talking about labor arbitrage at all. And therefore, maybe over a year or two, this is going to happen, because a lot of the other side of the segment is going to be hit by automation. And therefore, this 2 billion will certainly grow at a much rapid pace. The other sector, say e-commerce you mentioned about, probably e-commerce might take a dip and manufacturing will come up. That's it. Because of IoT. Because everything will get connected.
I can vouch for that. I agree. Right. That's interesting. So the initial theme that we had and that we just spoke about is that we have established the fact that there is a big and growing pie that India would command out of this market as we go around. But having said that, trying to navigate the Indian market is not going to be that easy in its own way, correct? I think that's clearly a call out. Now, coming to you, Kaushik, how do you see this whole thing playing together? What's your take? How's the government going to play a role? How are these things going to work out?
I think, you guys bring up some interesting stats, like 300 billion market, we are 0.06%, 2 billion, less than 10%. So I think, in order to take it to the next level, where you're talking of, we have the talent, we have the skills, etc. There are few things that government has been doing already and where it can take the next leap. One is, on the aspect of this whole talent availability, collaboration with the industry, academia, and government in bringing, providing a platform where we can, have standardization of skills, talent pool across the industry on various levels. So that's one thing that, government can play a very definitive role. The second aspect that I feel that, and they are doing some of it, when you think about NASSCOM, and the work they are doing in providing, standardized job roles and definitions, and I have been part of some of those discussions where they have asked for standard job roles that we can roll across industry, skills, etc. I think that's a step in the right direction, which will, provide, now when I talk to people, there is 10 different definitions of what a data scientist is. And so by doing some of that and bringing the industry and the academia to talk to each other, government can play a pivotal role. The second aspect that I think is equally important, which is in IT policies. So if you think about cybersecurity and the leakage that has happened, there is a lot more that we can do on that around, encryption, around data leakage, data retention, data privacy. Because those rules, if you compare with the Western standards and what the policies in place are much weaker. So I think we need to look into that. While there are things that have been put in place, like we have put a cyber policy in place in 2013, I think there are still some challenges that we see in that direction. So those are the two pivotal aspects where government can play a key role in bringing us up, and as we move towards the next, analytics 2.0.
Got it. The other interesting thing, and Anshu, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I may add to this, right? So I think all of us, or a large amount of us have seen the whole IT wave happen about 20, 25 years back. And then, how the government then kind of, slowly pitched in. I don't think the government was also expecting at that time that it's going to ride this wave. But I think the other thing that the government, can do, and like all of us do, is, take some learnings from there on. And then establish the public-private partnership, encourage universities, which I'm sure it's happening, right, in various forms and shapes.
In fact, it is already happening. Absolutely.
Yes.
NASSCOM has taken initiatives, just to add this point, NASSCOM has taken initiatives. It has already set up this IoT COE, where there is a complete environment to take things forward. The other one that is coming up is for data science and advanced analytics. There is a complete it's a COE based on PPP model.
Right. So, the point I was making is that also there are newer things. Like, for example, there is obviously one model of, just go to a training institute or get, yourself certified and so on. But then the analytics industry, the beauty of that is that, the devil is in the details, and also, in how you kind of apply that thinking or the thought process to the problem you're solving. So crowdsourcing platforms, or, a Kaggle-like initiative. I mean, if a government-sponsored Kaggle-like initiative, sort of, kickstarts, I think there is opportunity for that.
Yeah, the other thing that I've personally noticed, and just to add here, is we don't have a choice. Our government doesn't have a choice. There is an interesting stat that I was talking to someone who's telling me that for every rupee or for every dollar that India actually puts into this, China puts in about 120 times more, right? So the rate at which the countries are developing, we've got to follow suit. We've got to figure out what's working for them, because it's no longer a choice. I mean, a lot of the services that the government provides, it really requires good data. It requires good infrastructure, both from a data systems infrastructure as well as from a data analytics infrastructure to actually go work on that. And I think the government's opening up to that. I think they're waking up to that fact, and there's a lot of money that's getting poured in. I think that's very important. But again, just to belabor that point a little more, Kaushik, what kind of job skills and markets does this mean for India?
Yeah,
what does it mean?
that's a great question. I think and goes hand in hand with what Anshu you are referring to. When I look and step back, how many of you, let me ask a question to the audience, how many of you are taking a course in R or Python? I can't see the hands. Show of hands.
Yeah, there are plenty actually.
Just a few,
Just
surprisingly.
a few, okay.
Others must
Must already have taken some course from Andrew Ng, etc., etc. So I think, when I look at the, some of the surveys, people say 36% of all the jobs that have been, are in circulation need R, or 30% need a Python. So, but when I step back, I see there are three fundamental vectors that play around in this job skill space. One is, the whole aspect of coding, which I find, there are a certain genre of people who have those coding skills, whether you're coding in Python, whether you're coding in Java, coding in C, etc., etc. That is more of the IT programming side of the house. The second type of skills that we find, which is needed in this space is more of the statistical modeling and the, more of the mathematical modeling skills. So, what do I mean by that? People who have the ability to do hypothesis testing, machine learning models, whether it is random forest, support vector machines, to all the way to, neural nets, etc., etc. But I think the third most often neglected vector in this is what I call is the business knowledge and the context of what you're doing.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's where I think, it is a most, neglected because when I talk to the data scientists and the data engineers of the world, they seem to get a flavor of, they know how to code and all that, but they sometimes don't get the business knowledge and the context in right mind, because some of these, models can be built in context of the problem that you're solving. For example, if you are taking a fraud solution, or if you are taking a anti-money laundering kind of a solution, or a cross-sell, upsell, solution, there are certain kind of regulations that you are working in a certain industry. There are certain types of data that are available. So when you cross-pollinate, from example, from e-commerce to a BFSI, the same business, assumptions no longer hold true. So I think we have to know those assumptions to make those models that much insightful. And I think on top of it, if I wrap it all around, if you have to really become a really successful data scientist and a, data engineer at the end of the day, you have to wrap it all, and come up with powerful visualization and storytelling, and which can then tell a story and insights to the executives. Because if you think about the executives of today, they don't really care about the mumbo jumbo of the models that you do. They care about the insights and the actions that you can drive from those models that you have built.
Got it.
So I think that those are some of the 3-4 characteristics I would say that are critical for success.
Yeah.
Got it.
Just like
Absolutely spot on, Kaushik, if I may add. that, and I think the reverse is also true. So what Kaushik said is that, apply the business context. Without this, it's just okay, not trivializing the complexity of models, etc., that we all create, but it's still a model. Without a business context, there's no business problem being solved. But I'd also say that, I think what we also are missing is the other way around, that, we are looking for somebody else to define the business problem for us, and then we'll go and, create a model. I'll give you an example. Most of us, drive around the city, we buy a car and so on, and we take it for a service. The service guy, and most of us, go to the same dealer that we would have bought it from and so on. That's like, that's a common practice. And that guy who's servicing your car every 3 to 6 months knows exactly what's wrong, or exactly, what is the true value of your car. Now, he also sells. He also has a unit where he's selling cars. So how many times have we experienced that the service manager comes and tells you, Anshu, by the way, you only have 6 months left before your car value will start really declining, and now is the time you need to, think of buying a new car. So those kind of things, that can actually turn into a sale for them. But, we don't do that. So, while we are still thinking somebody needs to define a business problem for me. But if, we kind of look around and say, how can we convert something into, how can that be monetized? I think that's what is where the value of...
If I can just add to what Anshu was saying, in our companies and many of the organizations I have worked in, they have almost added a layer of, a business translator. So who works between analytics and the business. They take the problems from business and then, and then convert into an analytical problem. Because if the data scientists are able to bridge the gap, then they can be that much powerful and up the, the value chain compared to where they are.
Agreed.
Very nice. And Ashwin, you had a point there?
Yeah, so couple of things. First is, when you look at the analytics space, I think really, everybody gets, kind of caught up with this thing about doing the advanced analytics and so on and so forth. The reality is, while that is the exciting and the sexy stuff to do, it is 10-12% of all analytics jobs, right? The biggest chunk is the mundane work, which is the, dashboarding, the BI insights, and so on and so forth. And, one should not take away the fact that that is equally as powerful in driving business outcomes, as opposed to coming up with a eureka solution through the insights that you get.
Absolutely.
Right?
You're right.
Absolutely.
You're right.
And
Your model is
so
as good as the data you get.
Sorry?
I said your model is as good as the
Data
data
you
that
get.
you get.
And to add on to that, what Kaushik mentioned in terms of the visualization, and I think, most people in the analytics function fail when they're not able to express themselves in a way that the business leaders can understand, I work with a very small team of analytics people, but, I can tell you that unless I sit them down and tell them, and I have a reasonably good bent of maths and stats in me, but if it was my marketing guy or my sales guy and they were to talk, they probably are speaking in Greek and they're listening in French, right? It's as much as a gap as
No, but that's a good one. Around this concept, let's just take this a little further now. Now, we all established that context is critical, context is king, right? Now, there's an analytics ecosystem that's really coming up in India that's catering to very specific small boutique firms that have exposure to the kind of context and they come up with solutions, right? So what's your take on that? How is the Indian analytics ecosystem spurring up these smart startups in this space?
In fact, see, historically, if we look at the way our analytics industry has grown, and especially from India perspective, it has moved from pure body shop to maybe productivity gains. And overall structure was around cost arbitrage. Now we are at a stage where we have a complete level field. Two things would happen. The big players, big technology players, they are trying to look at the larger picture of creating solutions. If it is a customer journey, then end-to-end, you have the data solution, you have the platform solution, you have the processing power, and the outputs. So they are looking at a larger picture. But will they be able to create that on their own, everything on their own, including the embedded analytics? So that's a question. So In most cases, it will happen that you will have partnerships in place. And that is where the role of the niche players comes in. The niche players, they can cater on their own, that is one. Second, they can plug and play into this bigger picture. Now, what is it that really will enable this ecosystem? Number one, the niche players, they have the energy, the focused effort that goes on. There is a funding ecosystem which is already in place, and the required mindset is already there. So they need to focus on very specialized, pointed solutions with a larger picture in mind, kind of brick and mortar solutions which have IP attached to it. So they have an IP which will give them a long-term revenue perspective, plus it adds to the R&D ecosystem of the country. That is one. Second, they also act as the nuts and bolts which can fit into the larger factory. And there is a huge nurturing that can happen. Now, from government side, there is already an ecosystem that is getting enabled. As was mentioned, NASSCOM is taking initiatives as an intermediate body. From government side, we heard yesterday Andhra Pradesh opening up its database. I'm also hearing, in fact, Uttar Pradesh government is opening up with its databases.
I think another trend that we've all seen is also that these smaller firms which are getting spawned in India are also coming together to co-innovate. There have been a few examples that we've seen where people are joining forces. They come back and say there are complementary skills here, and then we're going to do that. But that also leads to an interesting point about while we speak about the analytics ecosystem, the educational ecosystem that feeds it, right? So Ashwin, what's your take? I mean, how's the education system really taking that into account and helping us move forward?
Yeah, I think it's beginning to happen. I think it's needs a lot more structuring that needs to happen with the education ministry taking lead there in terms of creating the the entire ecosystem of what is required, right? I mean, you look at it today. India is known for its engineers, right? Right or wrong reasons, they're known for the engineers. I think we need to evolve to a system where, besides engineering, and we all are good in maths and stats, right? So why can't you develop pure play institutes which are government recognized? Which have, maybe some amount of funding, which is going to help, attract talent, maybe at the primary level itself, rather than only at a secondary level. Which today, I guess, a lot of the institutes cater to the secondary level. That is, you do your graduation, you do your engineering, and then you get on to getting into a analytics-specific course. But can we not gear our maths and stats people to do this directly, have this curriculums co-created? So I think there's a lot that can be done in that space.
What do you think, Kaushik?
I think there are a couple of things that I can tie in with what Shashi said. If I think about the analytics industry and how that has spawned in India, it is, I think it spawned from mainly an IT technology space where it is, the byproduct of what some of the India IT service providers have provided. While there were some unicorns like, Musicma and Fractal and other companies. But what has happened in that journey is that since it's spawned from the IT space, some of the business problems that the analytics is planning to solve got lost. So, and ultimately analytics has to sit in between IT and business. And that's probably the reason why, if you look at the entire ecosystem of 300 billion market, we are only about 2 billion or 2.5 billion. So that could explain why we are not in that space where it should be. And I think a lot of companies still struggle between, whether to put whether business or IT. So that's one of the points. And probably in my view, it should be, a direct report to the CEO and the board sitting between IT and,
I agree with that.
And business, not in any of these functions. The second point which you make, Ashwin, on the skills, which is related to this, is do I need more IT skills or do I need more analytical and business skills, and what do I need to make me a better analytics professionals? While there are classroom trainings that can groom people, and if I come from a pure IT-centric mindset, where we have tons of, we have given engineers in batches, software engineers, software coders, where you have a very dedicated set of, classroom training dedicated on learning and running codes and all that, doing it very efficiently. That model worked well. But if you think of the digital age of today, where a lot of content is available through Coursera and the MOOCs of the world, through, like say, Andrew Ng teaching from Stanford, teaching all the machine learning courses, there, that calls into question some of the classroom training techniques, because now you can learn things more asynchronously at your pace, at your speed, and at your will, and pick the courses that you need.
That's interesting, Kaushik, because this also leads up to the point which says that, while you can learn on your own, the one consequence of this, positive or negative, is the sheer amount of technologies out there. And as professionals, one of the problems we face is, which technology do we invest in? So there is this increasing move towards proprietary versus, kind of emerging
Readily
source,
available.
stuff like that, right? So Anshu, what's your take? I mean, you're a practitioner. What do you feel?
So I don't know if I'll sound controversial to, when I'll say that, I think we really need to relook at our education system if we need to be at the top curve of the analytics industry. Because I think traditionally, and all of us have gone through that schooling system, I'm sure our children are going through the same kind of schooling system as well, where it's all about, learn. It's not about apply. You are measured on their ability to learn and reproduce versus your ability to apply or problem solve. And analytics is all about applying and problem solving. It's not about learning. Now I've learned Java, or I've learned C++, or I've learned SQL. It's no longer about that. It's about, because, exactly to the point that, today a Coursera course is available to everybody. The person can be sitting in, a tier A, tier 2, tier, 3 city in India, or even outside it, and and the competition is global, and it's no longer, just, how many, am I a computer science engineer and so is my neighbor, so, we have access to the same campus interview, opportunity. So I think, the mindset has to change. Fundamentally, if we want to be, competing with the likes of, the startups coming out of Israel, for instance, or they're coming out of Ukraine. Ukraine has a tremendous amount of, analytics startup system, the startups that are really kind of making a dent, the product firms coming out of there. Silicon Valley, we all know the kind of, companies, they started as startup companies and now they are absolutely the top firms in the world. And, how they continue to innovate and, apply. So it's all about getting into that applied mode rather than, just, the more, it's no longer about wearing your badges on the label. Yeah.
Just to add to one point, you mentioned, see, the entire mindset has to change, the ecosystem of education has to change. I just had to add one point here. See, this is a long drawn process. It may take maybe 10 years, 15 years to just change the syllabus of or course of curriculum of a particular stream. So it's a long drawn process. So does that mean that we should stop at that and do nothing? So that is where I strongly believe, see, one, because we are at a level playing field, training in the form of skilling, upskilling and reskilling, whichever terms you want to use it contextually, so that is an area which has a huge potential for Indian startups. Because, see, although the likes of Coursera's might be there, but still you need to have some face-to-face discussions, maybe that is one aspect. Correct. The other is kind of, you need to customize some of that as well. Yeah. Because I myself, I have seen, say, one of the Stanford University lecture series. Now, and I did that with a very different purpose altogether. I just wanted to know, what do they teach in this particular course? And I was looking at the complete machine learning and AI curriculum. A lot of that. And Professor Lee, who is one of the prominent names, his lecture series. What I saw was, there were two aspects to it. One, whosoever is doing things, say, in a closed room, he will have a different advantage. The reason is, see, there are some aspects, see, you want to crunch maybe a 3-year course into maybe 10 days or maybe 3 months.
Capsules.
That's it.
That is the worrying part. What would happen is, say, for example, see, as was discussed here and came out, that data science is a field where you need a lot of things. and that is a covering that is required for the solutioning part. Now, remember, few years or a couple of decades back when MBA courses started, it started as a generic course.
Correct.
And anybody who came out with an MBA degree, there would be a nomenclature
Got that,
that would
Shashi.
be used, jack of all trades.
Yeah. What I'm going to do though is, I'll let you finish that thought and then I just want to leave some time for question and
Sure.
answers. So if you just want to finish your thought.
Just, maybe I'll take half a minute. So the point that I want to make is, see, just online courses which are available, crash courses, I'm just worried about that should not get to an output which is jack of all trades but
And
master of none. That is the worrying point.
Right. Thanks. That's a good point. We'll have 5 minutes left, about 4:51 to be exact. So if you want to leave it open for questions, any from the crowd. You one there. Yes, Anand.
Pradeep, so one of the things, we spoke about the topic being how India is playing a global role in the global industry, and we talked about numbers, 30 billion, 2 billion, and a lot of time was spent on the skilling side of it, right? To me, with all due respect, I think there is a big component that is missing, which is, do we have a strong India on India story, right? We have a strong supply, but that supply is going outside. We have a reasonably strong demand. Businesses are running. It's not that they don't need analytics, but that is being serviced by sourcing solutions from outside. So now, if you do the math, if you do the 30 billion, 2 billion, now I don't know whether you're talking about the supply side or the demand side on the 2 billion, but how much of that is running on an India on India story? Because to me, unless we get that right, I think none of the other stuff matters, because you alluded to startups in Ukraine and Israel,
Right.
Silicon Valley. All of them grow from a very, very strong local market that they are servicing. Your thoughts?
Can I take that?
Good.
Can I take that? Okay. So, like I said, analytics is all about, the quest for solving a problem or identifying a problem. So if we have that inherently, irrespective of wherever you are, whichever geography, whichever location you are, and you would make it successful. So, and that's what the point I was making earlier on, that our education system is such, it kind of just compartmentalizing, saying that you structure it in you go through this regimen and only then, or we are waiting for somebody else to identify the problem. So if you have that gene or if you have that bug in you, then irrespective of whichever location you are in, you would be successful. Second thing, some of these startups that I was talking about, Ukrainian startups, they have a lot of Indians, and in fact the Israelis or the Silicon Valley startups as well. So why is it that an Indian, when he's in another geography, he's able to thrive and span his wings? So I think that's a point to ponder. I don't think there is any prescriptive method to that.
Yeah.
So let me add a couple of things. I think when you look at the context, you're dead on that the growth in the industry will be spawned by the local supply need for demand. I think there are two barriers that I've seen. One is, if you look at analytics, the appetite for analytics in the boardrooms for some of the Indian companies, and I'm sure there are exceptions to the rule, is probably smaller, because I think they go by more gut-based decisions as opposed to more business or data-based decisions. That's one of the things I've observed. Second is also the lack of infrastructure. Basically, some people may have the right bent of mind of applying analytics, but is the data available in the right form and fashion to power that on? I think those are the two challenges that we see in the India context more than anywhere else.
Got it. And
Absolutely, and I think it's more so in India.
More so in India than in
But having said that, I think in terms of the place for analytics, I think it's there. I don't know whether reporting directly to the CEO or not, but clearly it's certainly got a seat right up there. In fact, I have a board meeting, members coming down on Monday, and one of the three presentations is on analytics.
yeah, and I want to take another question, but we are going to be around after this session, so please welcome to have this chat. Yes.
When Anshu said application is more important, application of the data science that people they learn is more important than learning something. I agree to that. But if you look at any of the institutes that teach data science, they keep on telling how do we arrive at a particular equation, say regression equation. right, rather than application side of it. So what is your take? Do you think that a data scientist should have more knowledge in applying those things rather than learning as to how to derive a particular equation?
So let me take that. I think,
Can I
you want to take that?
Yeah.
I think I'll defer it to him because I think he
Yeah.
did make a point, during the
About that.
conversation about, the perils of, going fast track as well. So yes, please.
Correct. In fact, there are two aspects of it. So the definition of data scientist, that is really, it is going to undergo a change in sooner or later. So one is the application side. Now, when we talk of application side, now see literally the times when we did regression equation, we would write a code in Fortran 7.7, run it in Unix system, and maybe it would take a huge time to iterate. And today, you have one-line code to run a regression. The functional languages that are coming, whether it is R or maybe Perl or maybe your Python, these are functional languages. You write one-line code, you just call that library and it runs. And it runs in fraction of seconds. So the utility part, anybody can do it. See, for example, if I teach a graduate what is R language, how to run that code, he will be far efficient in running that execution part. But knowing the nitty-gritties of what is being done, data scientists will have to know.
Right?
Yeah. Let me just add one thing there. What I also find in the data scientist of today is, now the libraries are very standardized. Whether you are running stuff on Python or R, you can pull stuff from the library and run those. But unless you know the underlying mechanics of what to run when, like regression as you were mentioning,
It will be garbage
then
in,
it's
garbage
like
out.
a set of AK-47s to these guys and they don't know what to
do
fire
with it.
and when. So I think that is also important from an application standpoint to know.
This is what exactly I was talking about. People actually, we all know that, you have n number of packages available both in R and Python and for that matter, any data science tools. Now, what we need to learn is when a given data, what is that particular model or particular algorithm that we need to run? That is what is missing. If you go to institute, they'll simply say, okay, let me run the churn model. Now, this is how we have to work on it. Rather than saying that, okay, this is the data that we have, what are the kind of algorithms that you need to use, how to actually arrive at, how to change a business problem into a statistical problem, give a solution, convert that statistical solution into a business solutions.
Absolutely.
These things are not being taught. Because of which we are not getting the standard data scientists in India. Maybe 2 billion might go into 200 billion, why not? Provided we impart these kind of knowledge to the students. What do you all think?
That's a problem.
I'd agree. Yeah, I'd agree with you, absolutely.
I agree.
The analogy that I can think of is that, if you're a budding chef and you have to wow your, with a gourmet dish, but you need to know, you have a tool set with you, you need to know which knife to use for what. And you need to know the mechanics of what each of that does and how it kind of relates to the end product that you would create. So absolutely.
I know we are kind of really out of time, so I don't want to drag it any further. Thanks a ton for your time. We're going to be around, so we can have these one-on-one questions, and glad to interact with you. Thanks a ton.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Can we give them a big round of applause? Thank you.